everyone, StrangeSims here and welcome to another video. So, to start off, Merry Christmas to all who celebrate it today. Or as we say it here, Hristos se rodi. Anyways, today we're building a house and then decorating it for the festive season. A large number of people celebrate Christmas on the 25th. So a lot of people are kind of confused as to why I am celebrating it. Well, why people around me celebrate it on the 7th of January. And that is because I fall into the category of Orthodox Christianity. So we do use a different calendar. The two calendars I'm talking about are, of course, the new calendar, also known as the Gregorian calendar, and the old calendar, known as the Julian calendar. Orthodox Christianity, in certain parts, uses the old calendar as its base. So this means that Christmas and New Year's are switched around a bit. I fall into the category of Orthodox Christianity with Slavic roots, but I'll not bore you with those kind of details. Because my culture is not as far spread as some others, I have decided to talk a little about the Christmas traditions and some old traditions that we do during Christmas here. I will not be focusing on the religious aspects or even the overly Slavic traditions that have found their ways into the Orthodox Christianity nowadays. What does this mean? Well, it means that certain traditions that we have around here, around these parts, are actually very old traditions that have remained very popular with the people, so rather than being thrown out, the Orthodox just kind of accepted it. So they're old Slavic traditions that technically celebrated older gods and other mythological creatures that fall into the Slavic mythology. I'll be talking about my experiences celebrating Christmas and, of course, some differences considering that certain parts of normal Christmas actually happen during New Year's. That, of course, will be when I make the New Year's video for the New Year's that we celebrate here as well. You'll be hearing more about that in a different video. Christmas here is, as I said, celebrated on the 7th of January. But technically the celebrations start the day before. Now, Christmas, to us, it's called Božić, and the day before is known as Badnji dan. The day before Christmas is the time when you go into the woods to gather oak. You see, in the old Slavic tradition, oak, or as we call it here, hrast, has a lot of meanings. I will not delve into them, but even now it is considered a very important plant to us. So during the day before, people go into woods to essentially gather a few branches of the oak tree. The oak tree is of course then placed nearby, not taken into the household just yet. Normally, it is also gathered with some other plants. Sometimes it can be medicinal herbs, other times it can be certain fruits or vegetables, and of course, most of the time we do use hay. Anyways, it is during the night time on Badnji dan, or technically it's called Badnje veče, when you take the oak tree with, of course, other plants that you make into a sort of I guess you could call it it's not necessarily a wreath, but kind of like a bouquet technically without any flowers, just plants and leaves. And you take that bouquet and you take it into the house. Growing up, I actually would be going to the village nearby, to my aunt and uncle's place, a different one than the one I mentioned in one of the videos. And they live on a farm. And yes, they do have, back then, they had cows, pigs, chickens, sheep, and of course they did have a lot of land with different kinds of plants they were growing, both vegetables and fruit. I remember going with my uncle and my cousin. Technically, we call the closest cousins you have, we do tend to refer to them as siblings. So my cousin, aka my brother, would be going to find the oak tree and essentially cut down a few branches. And because it wasn't a farm, we did go to a forest nearby. It was always really fun to go because you know how it is during winter, everything's cold and there can be sometimes snow, though it was very rare. I was never lucky, and whenever I would visit, there would be no snow. But a few times there were, it really did look magical. We would go and find, of course, the tree that we would essentially cut down a few branches, larger ones this time around. And while my uncle would be cutting with a few of his buddies, since he would take a few kids of us, mostly me and my brother, but there would be also neighborhood children, there was always a fear that you could essentially stumble across a wolf or a wild animal, so it was much safer to go into larger groups than go on your own. Yeah, and while they would be cutting trees, we would be, of course, running around, as kids, playing and sometimes, told to gather different herbs to make it essentially more rich. Those branches sometimes could get really big. My uncle would be dragging them behind him, so yeah, they're really, really large. As in, barely fit into the doorway. Then we would, of course, go back home, to the house, and he would leave the branches of the tree outside. That specific that specific thing is referred to as badnjak. Badnjak is parts of the oak tree with mostly hay and a few other plants that is actually left leaning against the house outside. But then, during night, when the sun goes down, that is when the eldest member of the family would go out and gather the tree, badnjak, and take it into the house. Now, this is where actually an interesting thing happens, especially for the kids. You see, this tradition is mostly tied to the Old Slavic beliefs, and this means that when you bring it into the house, you're essentially bringing good luck and hope for prosperity. So when the eldest member comes into the house, the other members of the family, except the kids, are required to essentially chant a few words of encouragement and good luck, mostly in concept of good harvests and number of chickens to have, number of animals that you have on a farm so that it can multiply. While the younglings, the kids, actually go behind the oldest member who is carrying the tree, and then of course they make sounds. Most of the time we did chick sounds. When the eldest member finally brings in the tree, he actually leaves it near the fireplace. And the younglings actually are required to go and sit under the table so that all of the good fortune that is actually asked for will come true. Normally, the kids would sit under a table because you needed to be essentially in a house. So, technically speaking, you do have him who enters the house, and then you have additionally kids who follow him around until he lets go of the tree, when the kids, of course, are required to quote-unquote hide. There is, of course, places that the adults leave us, mostly blankets of sort and pillows that we're supposed to sit. They're also kind of filled with either hay or certain other plants to make it more natural. And we stay there, we stay like that, sitting and making noises, of course, the kids, for a short amount of time. Afterwards, we of course come out, and then we of course have the dinner where we're all together. Because the oak tree that we take from the forest is rather large, when you take it into the house finally, you take the piece of the branch, a smaller one, and then you put it somewhere where it's very easily visible, and of course you decorate it. I know what you think. Well, of course you decorate normally the Christmas tree for that kind of a thing. And you do. We actually have both the Christmas tree and oak that you decorate as well. So technically you do have two trees in the house. Now, in the morning, it's when the traditions continue. What happens is that the youngest members are called Pleasantview. They're essentially required to awaken first, which of course kids do not want to wake up early on vacation. So we're required to wake up early, and we're required essentially to finish what was started last night. What happens is that you take a smaller branch of the oak tree, and then you put a part of it in the fireplace, and then you start to essentially poke the fire and say, different things that you said last night. For good harvest, good health, good things to follow essentially the family and everyone in it. After that, the kids, the ones that did that, are given gifts. Most of the gifts are in the form of clothing with a little bit of money on the side. Now, interesting fact about the money is that if you want to have good fortune in the form of financial, you're not supposed to actually use that particular money until next year. Now, with all of that finished, you of course have the Christmas, or as we call it, Božić, when to anyone that you greet, you actually don't say Merry Christmas. We don't say those. We say Hristos se rodi. And the person you're talking to has to answer with Vaistinu se rodi. The sentence is essentially the acknowledgement of the day that Christ was born. So there is no big secret in those words. The day before Christmas, of course, you are fasting, so no meat. For me personally, it was never a problem because I do prefer fish over traditional meat, but majority of people do not, so it's always kind of funny when you think about it. Well, a lot of people know that you do have the great fast that's happening right around Christmas time. Now, this of course ends with the 7th of January for us, and that is when you of course eat meat again. A lot of times the adults would of course make sure that they have either a pig or a sheep ready to prepare it as food for us as we're starting to eat normal food again. Now, there are certain foods that are essentially being made during this. One of the foods that normally is being made for Christmas is bread with specific surprises inside of it. It is technically kind of like a smaller loaves of bread that are connected, and then the people who are involved normally do a spinny spin of it between them and then separate it into pieces. And then you take a look and see what you got. Because in the bread you actually have different seeds and different pieces of branches, herbs, as well as small pieces of coin. You have to find it, of course, you have to find it before you start eating, otherwise there might be an accident waiting to happen. Coin for money, which is considered to be good luck for that specific person in the financial sense. Then there is the one that can get some sort of seeds, which is normally connected with good harvest. And of course you have certain herbs which represent the good health. Growing up, I actually really loved all of these Christmas traditions, and they were very fun both to do and to see. It was very fun, but it was very welcoming, and I think that's kind of a thing that a lot of times it does feel missing. And nowadays that I'm an adult, I don't go anymore to the farm, mostly because after my grandfather passed away, my uncle's father and his kids moved out, the traditions kind of stopped because both kids are actually living in the city and don't necessarily always have time to visit for Christmas. There is really no one to do that kind of thing. But looking back on it, I have very fond memories of both the craziness and the warmth and welcoming feeling that all of these traditions gave to me as well as to others. Now in the city, the Christmas is of course different. We still do some stuff, as I said. You still get, of course, branches of the oak and then take it into your home. Where I'm currently at, with my aunt and uncle, a different aunt and uncle, the ones that live in the city, we actually can buy pieces of the tree, so that's actually not that big of a deal. The big deal is that when I'm at my own home, we don't have that. There is no way to buy these things. You have to go, as I said, you have to go into the woods and find the correct tree. And now, I am kind of an idiot when it comes to plants, and this means I cannot, for the life of me, make a difference between different plants, especially trees. So finding it is really funny, and I kind of find everything except the thing I need. When you do it for the city, you kind of take much smaller branches. You don't take big branches. So they essentially do kind of look more like a flower bouquet than really anything big. Due to timing, you actually have a very large period of time around, as I said, around end of December till about middle of January when you do have these decorations up. Because of my placement, I guess, we do have people who celebrate Christmas on the 25th. So both days are recognized as Christmases. This means that we do start decorating the same time as everyone else. But our decorations stay a bit longer than most people assume, due to, of course, our Christmas being later and, of course, New Year's being even later. You'll find out, sadly for me, both days fall onto the day when I'm actually supposed to record. So. And the house is finished. If you want to see more, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Hristos se rodi!